I never thought I'd be the guy to catch his wife cheating, especially not in the way I did. Jennifer and I had been married for 5 years now. We started off pretty solid, good jobs, a nice house, everything seemed fine. But over the last year, I started noticing little things. She'd be more irritable than usual, snapping at me over nothing, canceling plans last minute, and her phone seemed glued to her hand more often than before. At first, I thought maybe she was stressed at work or just going through a rough patch, but then came the real telltale signs. She'd be unusually secretive, hiding her phone when I was around, deleting texts, and sometimes sneaking out of the house for business meetings that I later found out she wasn't even scheduled for. One evening, I was working late in my lab. My setup involved some pretty advanced sensory tech, a mixture of neural interfaces and perceptual mapping. I've been working on this project for a couple of years, trying to enhance human perception, and I was really close to a breakthrough. It's my life's work. Jennifer has always been supportive, but lately she's been dismissive, even sneering when I talked about my progress. She'd say things like, "Oh, so now you're the genius with the mind-machine interface. Guess I'm just your side project." That stung more than I want to admit, but I brushed it off. That night, I was deep into calibrating some of the latest perceptual expansion mappings when I noticed her phone sitting on the counter. I usually trust her, but something about her distracted behavior that day nagged at me. I knew I shouldn't, but I picked it up. And that's when I saw the messages. At first, they looked innocent enough, texts about her meeting her friend or buying groceries. But then I saw the timestamps and the engaged timestamps. They were late at night after her supposed shopping trip. And then I saw the text from a number I didn't recognize. The words, they weren't just friendly, they were flirtatious, explicit even. She'd been talking to someone, possibly someone she met through work, or maybe someone she'd been cheating with for months. The moment was like a punch to the gut. I felt my stomach drop, my hands trembling. I kept reading, trying to deny what I was seeing, but it was right. There in front of me. Jennifer had been lying. All this time she'd been sneaking around, hiding her phone, making excuses for her sudden secrecy, and I had been blind to it. My mind raced, trying to process how I could have missed the signs, how I could be so naive. I felt betrayed not just by her actions, but by the fact that she'd lied to me so blatantly. I was furious, desperate to confront her, to get her to admit the truth, to hear her explain why she thought she could get away with this. That night I didn't sleep. I sat there staring at her phone, feeling the sting of betrayal. I knew I had to confront her, there was no way I could keep quiet now. But I also knew that once I did, everything might change forever. I was torn between wanting to lash out and wanting to understand why she'd done it. But I also knew one thing, I couldn't let this go, not without answers. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let her get away with cheating on me behind my back, especially not after all we'd been through. The betrayal felt like a punch in the chest, and I could feel my anger boiling over, ready to explode. The next morning I woke up with a knot in my stomach that I couldn't shake. The image of those texts still haunted me, looping over and over in my mind. I kept asking myself if I'd been blind, if I had missed all the signs, or if I just didn't want to see the truth. Jennifer was still sleeping when I got up, her face peaceful but her eyes closed too tightly, as if she was trying to shut out the world. I stared at her for a long moment, feeling a mix of rage, sadness, and confusion. How could she do this? How could she betray me after everything we built together? I decided I couldn't just sit on this information. I needed to know how deep this went, how long she'd been lying to me. I started digging through her things, her emails, her social media, anything I could find. But then I remembered a crucial detail. Her recent behavior around her devices had been strange, more anxious, more controlling. She'd been deleting stuff, hiding her phone, and I caught her once hurriedly trying to wipe her browsing history. I knew she was hiding something and I needed to find out what. That's when I remembered the calibration sessions I'd heard about, the ones she'd been attending at her workplace. She kept insisting they were for her job, but I knew better. That's where she'd be meeting her lover, I was sure of it. I decided to go to her workplace just to see if I could spot her or catch her in the act. I didn't want to directly confront her yet, not without proof. I just wanted to see her to confirm what I suspected. I waited until she left for her meeting, and then I slipped out behind her. It wasn't hard. She was always careless about how she left her phone or how she spoke about her sessions. I followed her to a nondescript building downtown, a place I'd never been in before. I parked a few blocks away and watched her go inside. I looked around, trying to spot anything unusual. That's when I saw her enter a side door with someone I didn't recognize. The way she looked at him, it was intimate, almost predatory. My stomach clenched again, and I felt my fists tight. I stayed hidden, watching as they disappeared into a room. I knew I shouldn't have, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed to see more. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. They were in there, clearly engaged in something more than just a business meeting. I could see her leaning into him, whispering, her hand lightly resting on his arm. I could see her smile, something I'd never seen before. My mind spun with questions. Was it only physical, or was there something deeper? Did she think she could keep this secret forever? I started to feel the heat rise in my chest. My heart was pounding so loud I was worried someone outside would hear. I knew I had to do something, either confront her right then or figure out how to gather enough evidence to expose her fully. But part of me just wanted to storm in there and drag her out, yell at her, call her a cheating bitch. The betrayal was raw, and it was bleeding out all my patience. I felt an overwhelming urge to punish her, to make her regret this, to show her she couldn't get away with it. But I also knew I had to stay calm, to think clearly, even if that was the last thing I felt like doing. The hours ticked by, and I finally made my way back home, feeling shattered but with a plan forming in my mind. I knew I had to gather more proof, maybe even use some of my tech to catch her in the act. I was angry at her, but I was also hurt. Deep down, I still loved her, or at least I thought I did. Now I wasn't so sure anymore. What I did know is that everything had changed. The person I trusted the most had been lying to me for who knows how long, and I was determined not to let her get away with it. Not without facing the consequences. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to what I saw, to the way Jennifer had looked at that guy inside that room, so intimate, so familiar. I kept asking myself if I'd been blind, if I'd missed all the signs. The betrayal felt like a punch to the chest, and my stomach was in knots. I was furious, yes, but mostly I was hurt. How could she do this to me? After everything, I thought about what I'd invest in her, years of marriage, trust, the plans we had, the future we dreamed of. All in jeopardy now because of her lies and her blatant cheating. I needed a plan. I decided I wouldn't confront her immediately. Not yet. I needed more proof, something concrete. I started thinking about the tech I was working on, my sensory enhancement device, the perceptual expansion mapping I'd been perfecting for months. I had the ability to manipulate perception, to make someone see or experience things differently. I'd always wondered if I could use it somehow, if I could catch her in the act or at least make her reveal herself. The next morning I woke up early, knowing she'd be at her session. I stayed home, pretending to work, but really I was setting up a small, covert operation. I rigged my neural interface calibrator, an advanced, experimental device I'd been developing, to subtly record her perceptual state during her next session. If I could tap into her sensory inputs, I might be able to find out what she was really doing, what she was feeling, or even see what she saw. It was risky, and I knew I might be crossing a line, but I couldn't let her get away with this without some kind of proof. When she left for her appointment, I activated the device and followed her at a distance, just far enough not to be noticed. I kept a low profile, making sure the device stayed hidden. Inside that building, I could feel the tension rising. I knew she was with that guy again. Her body language told me everything. Their interactions were charged, close, almost desperate. I was almost breathless just watching, knowing I was about to see something I'd never forget. Suddenly, I saw her leaning in, whispering in his ear. Her hand was on his chest, then her fingers traced down to his belt line. They were both laughing and touching each other more openly now. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. My wife, the woman I loved, was cheating on me, right in front of my eyes. The device was recording everything. I felt a mixture of triumph and disgust. I had the proof now, enough to confront her, and maybe even more than I bargained for. I made a quick decision. I would wait until she returned home, then I'd confront her with everything I had, the texts, the visual evidence, the recordings from the device. I wanted her to see that I wasn't blind anymore. I wanted her to feel how deeply she'd betrayed me. The thought of doing this filled me with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. I knew the truth could blow up everything we had, but I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Not anymore. When she finally walked through the door that evening, looking guilty but pretending innocence, I was ready. I had everything I needed, and I wasn't going to hold back anymore. The moment she saw the look in my eyes, I was going to lay it all out, her lies, her betrayal, her cheating. I wanted her to know I knew the truth, and I wanted her to understand the damage she'd done. Because from that moment, nothing would be the same again. I could see the moment Jennifer realized I wasn't just going to brush this under the rug. She walked in, her face trying to be nonchalant, but her eyes gave her away. There was that flicker of guilt, quick and fleeting, before she plastered on what I could only describe as her bitchy mask. She threw her purse down on the table, looked at me with a defiant glare, and said, "What are you looking at? Did you find something?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady the rage and hurt swirling inside me. I pulled out my phone, where I had all the evidence saved, screenshots of her texts, timestamps, the recordings from the neural interface, everything. I could see her eyes flicker again, that mixture of anger and panic, like she knew she'd been caught but wasn't ready to admit it. I was furious, but I also felt a strange sense of calm, knowing I finally had her cornered. "Jennifer," I said, voice steady but seething, "I know everything. The texts, the sessions, the sneaking out. I've watched you, listened to you, and I've had enough. You've been lying to me for months, maybe longer. How could you do this? How could you cheat on me? Tell me, what the hell is going on?" Her face twisted into that typical bitchy sneer. She crossed her arms and shot back, "You're overreacting. It's not what you think. You're just paranoid. Seriously, you're losing it. It's nothing, just some stupid flirtation, nothing serious. You're making a big deal out of nothing." I stared at her, feeling a mixture of disgust and heartbreak. That nothing was her lying in bed with some other man, laughing, touching, having sex, telling him she loved him, maybe even planning to leave me. But I wasn't going to let her dismiss it so easily. I played the recordings from the neural interface, showing her her own voice, her own words, her own actions. Her face blanched, her eyes darted around, searching for an escape route. "Don't lie to me," I said, voice low and dangerous. "I saw her in there. I saw her touching him, whispering, acting like she's got her claws in him. And you think you can brush it off? You think I'm just some jealous fool?" She finally broke, her facade cracking just enough to reveal her true self. "Fine," she snapped, voice dripping with disdain. "Yeah, I cheated, so what? You think I'm some perfect wife? You're so damn obsessed with your stupid tech and your stupid work. I was bored, and he made me feel alive, unlike you." She stepped closer, eyes blazing. "You're so damn insecure, always in your lab, always with your gadgets. Maybe if you paid more attention, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." That's when I felt my blood boil. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. Every nerve ending in my body was screaming with betrayal. I wanted to hurt her, physically, emotionally, anything. But I forced myself to stay calm, to not do something I'd regret forever. Instead, I just stared at her and said, "You think that's an excuse? You think I don't know how much you've lied, how much you've betrayed me? You're done. I can't trust you anymore." Her face twisted into a mixture of anger and contempt. "Trust? You want trust? After you've been so obsessed with your stupid experiments and your perfect little world? You think I care about that now? No, I don't. I want out. I want a life that's real, not some tech-driven fantasy." She looked at me with pure venom. "So go ahead, do whatever you want. I'm done pretending." I watched her storm out of the room, that high-end mighty attitude masking how utterly broken she was inside. I stood there, trembling, feeling the weight of everything I just learned. I knew I had to decide what to do next, whether to fight for this mess, to try to save what was left, or to cut my losses and walk away. The pain was sharp, but deep down, I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I had finally seen her true colors, and nothing would be the same again. The aftermath of that confrontation hit me harder than I expected. For a while, I just stood there, staring at the door she'd slammed behind her, trying to breathe through the storm of emotions inside. The rage, the heartbreak, the sense of betrayal, they all mixed together into this heavy, suffocating weight. I felt like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer, But at the same time, there was this strange clarity. I finally saw her for what she was, nothing like the woman I married, just someone who lied, cheated, and threw our marriage away over some fleeting thrill. I knew I had to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to chase after her, to scream, to demand an explanation, but another part of me told me to stay calm, to think logically. I wanted to save what I could, but I also knew I couldn't keep going down this road, pretending everything was fine or hoping she'd change. I started gathering my thoughts, trying to remember every detail, every sign I'd missed, every moment that could have tipped me off. In the following days, I threw myself into analyzing everything I'd uncovered. I re-listened to the recordings, looked over the evidence I'd collected, trying to understand how I hadn't seen it sooner. I also looked at the impact this betrayal had on me, my sense of self, my trust, my future. Honestly, it was a mess. I felt angry at her, but I was also angry at myself for not seeing it. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let her so easily manipulate my trust? The pain was raw, but I knew I needed to face it and make a decision. I considered confronting her again, demanding she come back, trying to make sense of her lies. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't fix what was broken. I wasn't the kind of guy to stay in a relationship built on deception. I also thought about what was best for me, whether I should try to save the marriage or just cut my losses and walk away. The truth was, I was torn. Part of me still loved her, or at least the woman I thought she was, but the other part knew that she'd shattered that image beyond repair. One thing I did know for certain: I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. The trust I had in her was gone, and I had to start rebuilding my life from the ground up. I also realized that I'd been putting my work, my tech, my experiments ahead of everything else. Maybe I'd been so focused on my project that I missed the signs, missed her slipping away. That made me question everything about myself, about how I'd been living my life. In the end, I made a decision. I would talk to her one last time, but not to beg or plead. I'd tell her I knew the truth, that I was done playing her game, and that I was choosing to walk away. I wanted her to understand how deeply she'd hurt me, not just with her lies, but with her betrayal of everything we'd shared. And I promised myself that I would find a way to heal, to rebuild, and to learn from this. Because if there's one thing I've realized, it's that trust isn't something you take for granted. It's something you earn, and once it's gone, it's nearly impossible to get back. The day I decided to confront her for that final time, I was filled with a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. I knew that whatever she said or did next wouldn't change the reality. She had betrayed me, lied to my face, and crossed lines I could never accept. Still, I needed closure. I needed to tell her exactly how much her actions had cost us, how much I had trusted her, only to be thrown aside like garbage. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, even if she'd already made her choice. She was sitting on the couch when I walked into the room. Her face was tense, her eyes darting around like she was trying to find an escape route. She looked at me with that bitchy sneer, the same one she'd used to dismiss me when I had questioned her. I took a deep breath, stood tall, and finally laid out everything I'd uncovered, every text, every recording, every sign I'd missed. I told her I knew about her affair, about the sessions, about the other guy. I told her how her lies had shattered me, how she'd broken the vow we took to be honest. Her reaction was a mix of anger and indifference. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you?" she spat. "All high and mighty with your tech and your damn experiments, but you're just as broken as I am. Maybe more, hiding behind your gadgets while your wife cheats on you. That's real sad." I looked at her, feeling a strange coldness settle over me. This wasn't about winning or losing anymore, it was about accepting the truth. I responded, "You're right. I've been lost in my work, but I never expected this from you. I thought we had something real. Turns out I was just another fool trusting the wrong person. I don't want to be part of this anymore. I can't keep pretending that this marriage is salvageable when I know what you've done." She rolled her eyes, trying to dismiss me. "Whatever. You're just jealous because I found someone who actually makes me feel alive. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with your stupid interface, we might have had a shot. But I guess I'll be better off without your obsession, without your damn experiments. I'm done." I nodded, feeling a sense of finality. I knew I wouldn't look back. I told her I was leaving, that I was done with her lies, done with feeling like I was losing myself in her betrayal. I packed what I needed, not much, just my laptop, some of my tech, and a few personal belongings. As I walked out that door, I looked back once, knowing I'd never see her again the same way. She was no longer the woman I married. She was just a stranger in my past. In the days that followed, I started rebuilding my life. I focused on my work, on my experiments, on myself. I realized that the betrayal had taught me something important. Trust is fragile, and it's something you have to protect fiercely. I also learned that sometimes, love isn't enough to hold everything together when lies and betrayal are involved. Moving on wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And despite the pain, I knew I'd come out stronger, more cautious, more aware, and finally free from the chains of deception. Looking back, I understand now that some betrayals cut deeper than words. But healing begins when you accept the truth, face it head-on, and choose to move forward. Life's too short to dwell on what's broken. Instead, you pick up the pieces and build something better. That's what I did. And I'm finally starting to feel like I'm reclaiming myself. Less blind, more aware, and ready for whatever comes next.